back to Mrs. Wizard's Way. And have you ever wondered what it was like growing up in Kansas, or you've got this idea of what Kansas is like and you'd like to learn more? Hey, I've got you today. Let's get started. So I'm a Kansas girl, through and through. And you might think, oh, well, Kansas is like the Wizard of Oz. Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, or at least Glinda the Good Witch's bubble from the movie. It's not, I'm sorry. But I thought I'd share some of the story of who I am and what it was like growing up in Kansas. So I wasn't actually born here. I was born in Colorado, but before I even knew anything, I moved to Kansas. Mom and Dad said, we're done with Colorado. Let's go to Kansas, where my mom's family was. So we moved to South Central Kansas, just slightly north of Wichita area. So we're about half an hour away. So very much not Western Kansas, which is very different than Central Kansas, which is even more different than Eastern Kansas. So you might think Kansas is all the same. Sorry. It's not. So South Central Kansas is very much influenced by the Wichita economy. I have one younger sister in the picture there. She's in the picture. You just kind of can't see her because she's, wasn't born yet. And so there's Mom and Dad, and there's me with my ever so blonde hair at that time. So my family, my dad is a carpenter. He's a one-man show. He really never had a big crew work for him. He liked to just do it all on his own. He could build a house. He didn't do too many houses, mostly remodeling and fixing things up, redoing bathrooms and kitchens and things like that. He's pretty well retired now, but he still is out there dinkering around with stuff. He just doesn't have the ability to say no. We have been trying for years to teach him the word no, but he hasn't got it down yet. We keep trying. My mom, she was a very no-nonsense nurse. And she got that no-nonsense-ness from my grandma, but that's another story for another day. I'll love to tell you that story. I loved my grandma. But my mom, very big influence in my life. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She was killed in a car accident, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in our video. But that's who I basically am from, my mom and my dad. We grew up very middle class. We had enough for food and the bills, but not for always a lot of extras. As you saw initially, I was blonde. And I looked bald until I was about 4. My hair was almost translucent. It was pretty crazy. I was very much a very shy little girl growing up, very quiet, wasn't very boisterous or anything. Even in school, I chose the quiet instrument. I played the flute. I was the piccolo player in the marching band, as the chicks like to sing it in the song. There's a picture of me in the horrible band uniform. They were like 40 years old, and they made us get into them. They were terrible. They were polyester. They smelled. They had spats. What the heck is a spat? And it was like the covering that goes around your shoe. Yeah, we actually would wear that. The band director was a little fanatical. And so, yeah, after I did that from about 5th grade, 6th grade, all the way up to my junior year in high school. And I said, you know what? I am tired of what I called Iron Man band, where we were the concert band, the marching band, the pep band, the concert, just in season like contest band. We did everything. And so depending on what the season was, is what we did. And so I got really tired of marching on football fields and attending every single football game. And I really hated playing a solo, a Sweet Georgia Brown on my piccolo to the entire audience of basketball games, because it was such an iconic song for basketball games. I hated it. No pressure there. So I got tired of that commitment, so I gave up that passion. Growing up, we spent a lot of time with my mom's family. We lived in Halstead, which is where the Wizard's first shop was. They lived in Newton, where we currently actually live. This is where we are filming today. So it was about a 10-15 minute drive. So we spent a lot of time with my mom's family. We'd do anything together, have family dinners, Easter egg hunts. We'd come to Newton to do garage sailing. My mom was the queen of a good deal, and she got that from her dad. My grandpa was the king of sales. If he could find a sale and get a good deal, he was so happy. So Mom inherited that, and I got some of it too, I'll admit it. Even though we did spend a lot of time with my mom's family because they were in close proximity, we did spend some time with my dad's family back in Colorado because we traveled there pretty frequently because it was a close enough state. It was easy to drive, and we'd visit. When I was little, I actually met my great-great-grandmother. Yeah, the story goes, and I don't remember because I was a baby, but the story goes is that we were traveling someplace, and this is before the regulations of thou shalt keep your child in a car seat until they're, reaching puberty. No, it was just keep the baby safe, hold them if you had to, and that's what they did. She did. She actually held me. They were going someplace up in the mountains, and she held me going up there in a Volkswagen thing. That's the story. I wish I could remember. I wish I remember her. But the only time I really remember her was visiting her at the hospital near the end. I do remember that slightly, but I was still really little. I do remember both sets of great-grandparents on both sides of my dad's family, his mom and his dad's side. Do remember them. Loved my grandma's parents. They were so sweet and such loving people. But again, different stories, different times. In middle school, I got a brother, a big brother. Yeah, we had an exchange student when I was in middle school. He came from Sweden. He thought, yay, I'm going to go to America. It's going to be great. I'm going to be in Florida. I'm going to be in New York. It's going to be fabulous. And he got stuck here near Wichita, Kansas. And he was like, what the heck? He thought this was going to be the end of the world. He thought it was terrible. You know what? He loved it. He absolutely loved it. You can see he had a great smile. He still has a great sense of humor. I talk to him several times a year, keep up with him on social media. But yeah, it was a great experience. So I still have a brother. It's always interesting, though, when I talk to people about him, because they'll say, oh, yeah, his mom and dad are blah, 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 blah. And they're like, wait, shouldn't your brother have the same parent or parent as you? Yeah, that's always fun, but loved having that. So my sister and I have a brother, and he has two sisters now because he was an only child. So it works great for both of us. As growing up, there were some certain things you could come to expect at our house. On Sundays, we went to church. A lot of times, Mom and Dad would throw a roast beef in the oven, cooking really slow, so we'd have that for lunch. A lot of times, Sunday evenings, we'd get together and have all the family over, always for birthdays. If it was birthday, there was cake, always. There's also some yearly events that we really loved. Some of those were, of course, the 4th of July, and since we lived in a rural property, always hosted the 4th of July, and our house and our yard, it really showed, especially the yard, all the little papers and stuff everywhere. Not too many very scary events at the 4th of July. There's one or two times we had to get a bucket of water, but nothing burned down. We were pretty careful. We always dressed up for Halloween. There I am here. I'm a Smurfette. Aren't I adorable? Yes, during the age of the 80s when we had the plastic masks. Of course, we went to our church camp every single year in Topeka. That was a tradition, and that's a tradition that went back to my great-grandparents. Long before, obviously, me, but I never even met them. They were gone by the time I was born. So that church camp was really important to our family. We, of course, in the fall, went to the state fair. Couldn't miss fried foods on sticks, but we always loved looking at the animals and, checking out the rides and things like that. And every year, we always did a vacation. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that more in a second. But let me tell you about farm life. So we call it the farm, and that's just because it's a rural property. It really wasn't a farm at all. When my parents bought it, they bought it with, it had an old house on it and a house that had been started under construction, and it was kind of like the proverbial cement pond mentioned in Beverly Hillbillies. They had dug the basement, poured the basement, and that's as far as they got, and then rain, and then it filled up with like 4 feet of water, I guess. I don't know, I was a baby. So yeah, that took a long time, got that cleaned out, get it done. Then they built the house on top of it and moved off the old house. And so yeah, that's the farm. And growing up there, we had about 3 acres. That's about all that area was. As time went on, the persons that owned the field behind us sold it at an auction, and we were able to buy that property. So we bumped our 3 acres to about 39, 40 acres. We had a few animals. We had some chickens. We had a few rabbits, lots of cats and dogs. Those were the animals that we had. Nowhere were we making money off of them. And if you ever have chickens, well, they're cute. They give you eggs. You don't actually make money off of your eggs or save money from not having to buy eggs by the time you buy all the feed. But they were still fun to have. I mentioned earlier that we bought that farm around it. And my dad grew up in a dairy farm. That's where he grew up. And he kind of liked that idea of going back to some of that farming part. So he didn't want to do milking. Milking, that's, no. But some of that, you're raising hay, and so we could do that on the 5 acres or so that we had that was farmable because the house took up some of the space. And so we did that for a while. And so we were farming hay and he was selling the hay. And so that was always fun. Not so much when it came time to buck the hay bales because my sister and I discovered that we're sort of allergic to hay, at least not mega, anaphylactic reaction, but the next day we'd wake up and our face would be puffy and you're like, I learned to take a Benadryl before the night before, so I wasn't so bad in the morning. But it was nice. It was quiet there. Our nearest neighbor was about 1/4 mile away, so you had a lot of privacy there. There were about 3/4 mile away. There was another family that had 5 kids, but they had 2 girls that were my age and one that was my sister's age. So we really were pretty good friends with them. So we did a lot of biking between our houses. They did have a large cattle operation, and so they had an extra stock tank in the summer, and they'd set that up for swimming. So a lot of times we'd head over there and go swimming in their stock tank. It was not animal accessible. It was cleaned, so don't be thinking that. It wasn't a swimming pool quality, but it was far better than swimming in a pond in Kansas. So that was always fun. I remember we'd all go in a circle around and around and around and get the water going with us and going, and then we could sit down and the water would pull us around. That was always fun. Mom usually also had a garden. Sometimes it was bigger than other years, and as time went on, life gets busier, and so the garden got smaller. You know how that is as time gets us more busy. But it was really fun. I learned how to can, so I can preserve things. I don't really can fruits or vegetables like that. The only closest thing I do is jelly. I like to do jellies and things, like simple things like that, but I haven't even done that in several years. One thing I did spend a lot of time on was a lawnmower. Luckily it was a riding mower, and so spending a lot of time, we mowed about 2.5-ish, 3 acres of that area around the farm. Just, you can't do it always with a big tractor, and not that we had a big tractor, but that was where I spent a lot of my afternoons was mowing, at least in the summer. So everyone assumes Kansas has tornadoes like every other day, right? Sorry to break it to you. We really don't. And in actuality, there weren't terribly many tornadoes that ever got near our house. The closest tornado that ever came to our house was about 9 miles away. And the irony of that was that it actually happened in this one spot, and then about 12 years later it happened at another spot, not about like a mile away. So that was kind of interesting, but never did we have the threat of a tornado coming down, hitting our house. I remember my dad and the wizard going outside at different times throughout the years, looking up, watching the clouds, because you don't think a tornado's like boom, boom. It doesn't work that way. You can kind of see that the clouds are building, they're starting to form, they're starting to spin, and so it does take some time. But the one that did come nearest our house several years ago was, you could hear they were talking on the radio. We had the radio going. I was listening to it on my phone, and they were like, hey, yeah, it's in Bentley now. And then they said, and it's heading north. And I'm like, I'm north of Bentley, like 10 miles. But it veered off and it went to that other house. And it did not hit a house, that one that was most recently. It did hit a barn. And so the people there, they did lose a barn, but nothing was damaged other than the structure. No people were hurt, no animals, nothing like that. I did see a really big tornado. In 1990, there was an F5 tornado that really took out a city near here. It was pretty detrimental to that city. I remember sitting in the car with my mom and my sister. We were driving actually back from Newton to the farm, and we look over and we're like, that cloud is really low to the ground. That's a really big cloud. It was a mile-wide cloud. We get home, and that's when we start, because TV, we didn't have, internet wasn't existing in 1990, at least for everybody like we have today. And we get home, and they said that the tornado took out most of this town. I was like, oh my gosh. And so my mom, being the no-nonsense gal she was, we had an old farm truck, and she's like, okay, we're gonna go help them. So we took the old farm truck, it's like a 1954 grain truck, took it there to that city, and we're like, hey, we wanna help, because Kansas people, I don't get this. In other places, I don't get why they have to wait 100 years, it feels like, before they can start fixing stuff. Here in Kansas, the next day and the next week, people were there with their equipment, hauling stuff out, getting stuff ready to be rebuilt and getting repaired. And some of the guys running the big equipment, they'd have like this big front end loader and they'd pick up this big massive like steps to a house, massive concrete blocks, just massive. And they're like, you sure you want that in there? She's like, I don't care, and drop it in. And so we dropped it in, and sometimes it took that granny gear a little bit longer to get going, but we helped, and it was a good experience that I still obviously remember today. And I love the expression on those people's faces. They're like, really? You want to do that? And like, yep, we don't care if we hurt this. We want to help the people that are there. That's some of the swings of Kansas weather. In summer, it can be hot as Hades here, and in the winter, it can be super cold. I mentioned earlier that we went on vacations, and we did. We went on a vacation every single year. Now, don't be getting too many things like, you went on a vacation. You must have been all bougie, and yeah. Oh, no. We did see a lot of places. We saw like Mount Rushmore, we went to Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, Devil's Tower, Glacier National Park, the Gulf of Mexico, Painted Desert, Petrified Forest. Okay, they're kind of together. We went to the Oregon coast. We saw the redwoods in California. Crater Lake, Mount Rainier after the eruption, Washington, D.C. Yeah. And guess what? We drove to every last one of those. Yeah, we didn't fly to any of them. And we drove. Sometimes in a sedan Volvo, like a 240. Sometimes we were luxurious and we got a station wagon. Sometimes we were really lucky and got the van. Yeah, and here's a picture of what that van was like. Yeah, so we drove a lot and camped in tents a lot. And my dad was always that go. So we would be one place for a day, set up everything, stay overnight, pack it all up, go someplace else, set it all up. Yeah, over and over. So we did a lot of traveling. We saw a whole lot, but we did it in the cheapest manner possible, which is fine. I really appreciate seeing all of those different locations. I have great memories of each of those areas, but Lord help me, I am not going to go camping ever again. I had enough of that in the first, 15, 16 years of my life to do me well for the rest of time. Maybe in another 30 years I might be better, but right now, no camping. Camper? Sure. Not camping in a tent. I can't do that. We spent a lot of time in Colorado just because, again, it was close. My grandparents on my mom's side had a cabin. Here it is. It was fun. It was an A-frame. My grandpa, again, king of deals. That cabin had some very interesting design elements because at one point upstairs, the third level, I guess the peak of the A-frame, he got a good deal when somebody took out the very new rainbow shag. Yeah. And so it was new, and he's like, hey, can I have it? They're like, of course you can. So we had rainbow shag upstairs. One wall had a red damask design to it. A lot of paneling because it was easy to put up. So, but all of those, even though it may not be the most aesthetically pleasing environment, I still love it. We still remember it, and we still joke about the rainbow shag. So not to forget those bad things, but let's move on to some Kansas myths. Things that think, people from Kansas, this has got to be what Kansas is like. And well, the first one we think of is, besides the Wizard of Oz, which we've pretty well dispelled with the tornado thing, but it's flat. Well, in some places it is flat, and flat can be relative. Flat can be very flat, or flat can be kind of bumpy and kind of hilly. And there's different areas in Kansas that are exceptionally flat. That's where, millions of years ago, glaciers came through and flattened an area as they went through. Some areas, especially in eastern Kansas, that are quite hilly and very pretty. And having flat isn't always bad because flat allows you to see so much more. Great sunsets here. If we have a rainbow, you can see the whole thing, and sometimes see double rainbow going across as well. So sometimes flat isn't always bad. Roads here are usually pretty straight. They go, which is very nice. They don't go up and around and over and everything. And travel time is usually measured by minutes and miles. So if it's 30 miles away, it's about 30 minutes to get there. Give or take a little bit, but it's not like, I hear in big cities, it's just a few miles away. It's going to take us an hour to get there. No, if it's a few miles away here, it takes a few minutes to get there. It is even in Wichita, unless you happen to hit traffic, it's not going to take hours to do anything. Another myth is that everybody in Kansas listens to country music. Well, country music is a genre that people do listen to. We do listen to all sorts of music as well. And as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, let me tell you, we had some great music being played here. I do not remember my parents ever listening to country music, at least the country music current of that time. My dad did listen to vintage country, but he didn't make us do that. But I remember in the car with Mom, because we were traveling around with Mom, listening to Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and just a lot of great bands from the 80s and 90s. On trips, though, Dad would have us listen to his music, and I have a serious aversion to John Denver. I'm sorry, John Denver, wherever you are now, because I do know you have passed away. But yeah, we were tortured by listening to his music over and over. And unfortunately, I know the words to Rocky Mountain High and so many others. The trials of growing up as a child. Kansas is windy. Not like tornado windy, I mean just windy in general. And sometimes that can be very annoying when you're trying to do things, especially if you're filming outside and you hear, yeah, you don't want to hear that when you're trying to film. That's kind of annoying. But on a really hot day, it actually can make it feel a little better. You feel like you're in a hairdryer rather than just an absolute, bubble of heat. I don't know, but we're really windy here. The last one I have is small towns, they are nosy. They really are nosy, yeah. Halstead, town I grew up in, 3,000 people lived there, and if they saw a car they didn't recognize going down the street, they knew who you were. Now, were they going to do anything? No, they were just watching. It's like, wow, whose car is that? Oh, what's that? Who are they? So, yeah. And if a new kid came to school, yeah, we were knowing all about them, and sometimes they got accepted, sometimes not. That's what they are. Small towns are nosy. Well, and think about it. Aren't you nosy when you get a new neighbor? You kind of checking them out. Maybe not always going and harassing them, but like kind of spying on them. What are they doing over there? Yeah, that's kind of what small towns are like. It's just usually the whole town is that way. So that's what it was like growing up in Kansas. Safe. No major dangers or anything. I think there was, in all the years of living in Halstead, I think there was one murder in all, 40 years I lived there. There's not many dangerous elements to there. Even in some of the bigger cities, there's very few places that are dangerous. The cost of living here is pretty reasonable. And one thing I have noticed is, yes, people say, but it's so boring. Well, anywhere is boring. You can live in the most hopping place on the planet. You can live in New York City, but if you never step outside your door, it's going to be boring. There's places and there's things to do here as well. And you know what? I really appreciate when I go on vacations because it's like, wow, this is a really cool place. There's nothing like this at home. And I appreciate that. So I appreciate you watching the video today. I hope you're having a good day, and I hope to see you again next time. See ya.